So tonight I actually wanted to tackle one of the most frequently asked questions about Ramadan, particularly for those who set spiritual goals to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And one of the most frequently asked questions is, how much Quran should I be reading? Do I finish one khatam? What if I don't know how to read Arabic yet? Or what if I read very slowly? Or what if I don't understand it? Do I finish it twice, 3 times? What should my Quran goal be in relation to the other months of the year? And subhanAllah, this is a deep question, because one of the beautiful things about the Prophet ﷺ is that there is guidance from him for everything that we do, and that takes into consideration every circumstance. So before we get there, let's establish a few things. Number one, what you read in Ramadan should be more than what you read outside of Ramadan. Everyone understands that much, right? What you read in Ramadan should depart from your usual recitation of the Quran. It should not be completely abandonment and then getting into it just for 1 month. But there should be some discrepancy, a healthy discrepancy, or let's say a variation between your recitation outside of Ramadan and your recitation in Ramadan. This is something we learn from the pious predecessors. We see this from the Salaf. Number 2, the hadith where Jibreel alayhi salam used to come to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he would review the Quran with him in its entirety every year. And the last year of his life sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he reviewed it with him twice. Okay, so there's some level of review, some basis for the idea of going cover to cover in particular within Ramadan. And the only way Allah describes this month of Ramadan in the Quran is by its attribution to the Quran. The one verse, شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن. This is the month of Ramadan in which the Quran was revealed. Therefore, it is the month in which the Quran is to be recited like no other month of the year. So let's go through some rules, inshallah ta'ala, because this is actually a profound question, and it's an enjoyable one when you start to look at the lives of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ. I'm going to ask you guys some questions. Did the Prophet ﷺ actually give an equation for how much Quran you should read on a regular basis, or some advice to the companions outside of the month of Ramadan? Is there a number that the Prophet ﷺ mentioned of how many times the Sahaba could do a khatam, they could finish the Quran cover to cover in a month? Does anybody know? No? You got the hadith right, but the number's off. So you have the right sigha, but yeah. Alright, so there's one narration where the Prophet ﷺ prohibits, or seemingly prohibits, finishing the Quran more than once within 3 days. So that's one narration where the Prophet ﷺ seemingly prohibits finishing the entire Quran more than once in 3 days. Okay? There's another narration though. Abu Amir, you're there. What did you have for iftar? You're close. But there's actually a narration where there's something that's prescriptive. So this is prohibitive, this is prescriptive. It's a narration where the Prophet ﷺ mentions اقرأ القرآن في سبع, to finish the Quran every 7 days if you would like to, and to not go beyond that. And this is actually, so a weekly khatam of the Quran. And so this is actually, when you read in the books of ulum al-Quran, this is what's referred to as a tasbih. A tasbih. Reading the Quran once a week. And subhanAllah, it's a beautiful narration, because there is a mechanism to this. One of the tabi'een authentically said, I asked the Prophet ﷺ, I asked the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, how did you used to finish the Quran? What was your methodology? So they said that we would read 3, and then 5, and then 7, and then 9, and then 11, and then 13, and then we would finish off with Al-Mufassal, which are the Surah Qaf onwards. What does that mean? 3, one day, day number 1, we'd read Al-Baqarah, Ali Imran, and Nisa. Then we'd read 5 the next day. So you take after that Al-Ma'idah to Surah At-Tawbah. Then we would read 7, starting from Surah Yunus onwards. Then we would read 9, 11, 13 by surahs. And then the last day we would take Al-Mufassal, which are Surah Qaf onwards. Surah Qaf, until the end of the Mus'haf. So this is an authentic narration that gives you some insight into the ways, a methodical way that many of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ used to approach the Quran, reading it on a weekly basis. So that would give them 4 khatams a month. And this is something that's narrated from many of the Salaf. Imam Ahmad rahimahullah, his son, narrates that he used to do his tasbih from Jum'ah to Jum'ah. So he would always finish his khatam right before Jum'ah. This is narrated from Qatada rahimahullah, it's narrated from Al-Awza'i. Many of the Salaf, many of the companions had this habit of finishing the Quran once a week. So now you guys are like, okay, well, what happens in Ramadan? So the answer is once a week. We have to do it once a week now. So I can end the khatira now and send you all home depressed. All right? No, this is to just show you there was a methodology here. There was a method that they were taking into consideration. They were weighing the times that they would start to the time that it would end. Some of them even had a particular day that they would start, a day that they would end. And that's important because it shows you the importance of getting as structured as possible with it. That's the lesson I want you to take from this, is to be structured throughout the year. Think about it. So they're waking up and they know exactly how many surahs they're going to read that day. That's beautiful. And many of them were not hufaz, by the way. Many of the companions, the majority of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ were not hufaz. But they were thinking about how many surahs they were going to read every day. And they had a day in mind that they would start, a day in mind that they would finish. That keeps you accountable to something. And that's something that we should do throughout the year. The quantity aside. Okay, building on that. When Ramadan would come, it is obvious that the Sahaba did not see, and the pious predecessors did not see, that there was anything of dislike to increasing the reading of the Quran way beyond once every 3 days. And so you start to see the narrations, Sahaba, Salaf that would finish the Quran once a day in Ramadan. Some of them twice a day, narrated from Uthman radiallahu anhu or Shafi'i rahimahullah, even from a later generation, twice a day. And you're thinking, how is that possible? Just put that to the side for a moment and just establish the principle that they understood that when Ramadan came along, it was go time. They busied themselves with the Quran the entire day and entire night. Granted, the entire society revolves around reading the Quran in Ramadan. So subhanAllah, if you live in those societies at the time and you're walking around, there is a culture of the Quran here. Everyone's trying to recite as much of it as they possibly can. And they are exerting themselves in worship. And of course, some of this is included in their qiyam. They would recite in their qiyam, outside of their qiyam. The point is that there's another level of exertion within the month of Ramadan. So Qatada rahimahullah, for example, used to recite the Quran once a week. And then when Ramadan came around, so I want you to take another methodical point here. The first 20 days of Ramadan, he would finish the Quran once every 3 days. And then the last 10 nights of Ramadan, he'd finish it once a night. So he did once every 3 days within the first 20. And then he did once every one of the last 10 nights. That's what we're all going to be doing, right? Inshallah, one day. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us barakah in our time and give us that connection to the Quran. Now you're hearing this and you're going like, all right, this is so demoralizing. These people used to read the Quran that much, and then if you really start reading about like the way the Salaf looked at a person who said if you didn't finish the Quran once a month, it was like a sign of something. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us from hypocrisy or from being amongst those that abandon the Quran. And obviously abandoning the Quran is in spirit, is in action, is in recitation, is in so many different ways. But what do we actually take from this? Number one, a principle. Ramadan is the time to exert yourself with the Quran like no other time of the year. Number two, if you don't have a structure to how often you're trying to finish the Quran, even if it's once a year outside of Ramadan, you will fail with your Quran goals. You have to have a method there. You have to have a science to it. Start with something small and consistent and that you know you can accomplish, inshaAllah ta'ala. A very easy way to think about this is that your Quran goal for Ramadan, do half of it in Shawwal, inshaAllah ta'ala. A very easy way to think about this, that I'll do half of it in Shawwal bidnillah, and I'll try to make that my habit. If I have to adjust after Shawwal, maybe I'll adjust to a third of my Ramadan goal, but you've got to have some method there to how much you're reciting. Number three, circumstances are different. Imam al-Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala was asked this question about how often the Quran should be recited in Ramadan in particular. And he said something very profound. he said that, not everyone has the same circumstances. Everyone should read it at least to a point that they can understand and reflect. And then he said, and those who are doing other forms of good should not be discouraged. And he starts to mention, he says, the person, من كان مشغول بنشر الدين ومهمات الدين ومصالح المسلمين. He'll use these examples. A person who's involved in spreading knowledge or serving the Muslims, the volunteers, they're obviously not going to have the same opportunities to read. Extend that to the personal life, right? If I've got a full-time job, or if I have to take care of a house and I've got to do all sorts of other things, my circumstances will differ. Circumstances will differ from person to person. If I don't understand what I'm reading versus I do understand what I'm reading. Remember the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, the one who recites the Quran and struggles has twice the reward. And so, we have people, mashallah, who just converted, to Islam, right? And Hector's looking at me like he's going to hit me. He's like, what are you doing, man? What did you bring me into? You got to finish the whole Quran every night, all right? No. What do? You read the translation and you try to learn the Arabic as well. You read the tafsir, the understanding of it, side by side. It's about the time that you're spending to it, you're committing to the Quran and keeping yourself busy with it and trying to come close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now you want to get to a point where you understand the Quran itself. SubhanAllah, Sheikh Tahir Wyatt, we were in Umrah together and he said something very beautiful. He gave a sports analogy to this question. He said if you look at an athlete and you see an athlete that comes in as a rookie, right? So a convert to pro sports, all right? Comes in as a rookie. And even if they've got all the talent, they've got all the skills, the game seems too fast for them when they start. There's a nervousness there. Things are moving too fast around them, and you'll always hear them use this term. They'll say, the game slowed down for me. I settled in with practice, with experience. The game slowed down for me. I recognized things, the panic was gone, the understanding of the things, even if I have the technical knowledge, the repetition, the settling into it, the game slowed down. And subhanAllah, he used that example with, when we look at the Salaf with the Quran, the pious predecessors with the Quran, these were people that engaged the Quran day and night throughout the year. And so when they're looking at a page, it's different than when you and I are looking at a page. So we take the lessons from them. The answer is, engage it in whatever way you possibly can and push yourself and have a method to it. Have a goal for yourself, have a method to it, and have a method to how you're going to keep up with it after Ramadan. Remember the complaint of the Prophet ﷺ that my people, that my people have abandoned this Quran. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us people of the Quran that recite it, that long for it, that pray with it, that supplicate with it, that are raised by it on the Day of Judgment. Allahumma ameen. Jazakumullahu khair. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.